bizarre cases is back, and today we're diving into a chilling topic that's hard to wrap your head around, yet it's all too real. Imagine being just a kid and committing a crime so horrific that society decides you're beyond saving. These are the stories of children, yes, children sentenced to life in prison, and their cases will make you rethink everything you thought you knew about childhood innocence. So buckle up, hit the subscribe button if you haven't done that yet, because it's going to be a wild ride into the darker side of youth. Let's begin with the first story that stunned the entire nation. 1. Philip Chisholm. In October 2013, Philip Chisholm, a 14-year-old freshman at Danvers High School in Massachusetts, shocked his community when he was arrested and charged with the murder of his high school math teacher, Colleen Ritzer. Ritzer, 24, was a well-liked teacher who had asked Chisholm to stay after class for extra help. The two reportedly had a brief exchange, during which Ritzer tried to make him feel comfortable by asking about his recent move from Tennessee to Massachusetts. Chisholm appeared visibly upset by the conversation and soon after followed Ritzer into a bathroom near her classroom. Security footage from the school showed Chisholm putting on gloves and entering the bathroom shortly after Ritzer. Inside, he attacked her, strangling and stabbing her with a box cutter, and then raped her. He then moved her body into a recycling bin, wheeling it outside to the woods nearby, where he attempted to hide it. Chisholm then used Ritzer's credit card to buy a movie ticket that night. Chisholm was caught after surveillance footage, and his own actions led investigators to him. He was seen on cameras leaving the building covered in blood. He was seen acting strangely around the movie theater. Authorities found blood in the bathroom and Ritzer's body nearby. Chisholm was arrested and later confessed to the crime, with forensic evidence confirming his involvement. Chisholm's trial, which took place in 2015, raised questions about his mental state. His defense team argued that he suffered from severe mental illness and was not criminally responsible, citing evidence that he was experiencing a psychotic episode during the crime. However, the jury found him guilty of first-degree murder, rape, and armed robbery, concluding that he understood his actions. Due to his age, Chisholm could not receive a life sentence without the possibility of parole, as required by U.S. and Massachusetts Supreme Court rulings. Ritzer's family expressed deep loss, but hoped to honor her memory through charitable work and educational programs. The case left a lasting impact on the community, highlighting both the complexities of juvenile crime and the challenges of mental health issues in the justice system. 2. Lionel Tate. In 1999, 12-year-old Tate was living with his mother in Broward County, Florida, when a tragic incident occurred. His mother, a Florida Highway Patrol trooper, left him in charge of a 6-year-old family friend, Tiffany Unick. According to Tate, while they were playing, he began mimicking wrestling moves he had seen on TV. The play quickly escalated as Tate, who was much larger and stronger than Tiffany, began punching, kicking, and wrestling with her. Tragically, the rough play turned fatal, and Tiffany died from severe injuries consistent with violent physical abuse, including a fractured skull, broken ribs, and a lacerated liver. Tate later claimed that he never intended to harm her and that he didn't fully understand the danger of his actions. In 2001, at age 14, Tate was tried as an adult for first-degree murder. He was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole, making him the youngest person in the U.S. at the time to receive such a sentence. His case sparked widespread national debate over the prosecution of minors as adults, with many questioning whether a child so young could truly comprehend the consequences of his actions. In 2003, Tate's conviction was overturned after an appeal, with the court agreeing that he hadn't fully understood the legal proceedings or the weight of his plea at the time. As a result, he was released in 2004 under strict probation, which included mandatory counseling, curfews, and other conditions. However, in 2005, Tate was arrested again for violating his probation by possessing a gun and committing armed robbery. He eventually pleaded guilty and was sentenced to 30 years in prison. 3. tjlane. tjlane is infamous for his role in the 2012 Chardon High School shooting in Ohio, where he opened fire in the school cafeteria, killing 3 students and injuring 3 others. The shooting took place on the morning of February 27th, when Lane, then 17, walked into the cafeteria with a .22 caliber handgun and began firing at random students. His actions caused chaos and terror, leaving classmates and faculty in shock. Lane was arrested shortly after the shooting, and his behavior during the trial shocked many. he was often seen smirking and making callous, unapologetic statements about his actions. At his sentencing, Lane wore a t-shirt with the word killer emblazoned on it, further horrifying the victims' families and the community. He was sentenced to 3 consecutive life terms without the possibility of parole. In September 2014, Lane briefly escaped from an Ohio prison, sparking widespread fear and outrage. However, he was caught just hours later and returned to a maximum security facility. 4. Nehemiahgriego. A Mexican teenager committed a tragic crime in 2013 that shocked his community. At just 15, Nehemiah killed his parents and 3 siblings in their Albuquerque home. His father, Greg Griego, was a well-known pastor and former prison chaplain, while his mother, Sarah, was a homemaker who homeschooled the children. The crime took place on January 19, 2013. According to reports, Nehemiah, using firearms he found at home, shot his mother and younger siblings as they slept, and later waited for his father to return, whom he also shot. Authorities revealed that Nehemiah had been struggling emotionally, and it was reported that he may have had feelings of anger and isolation. After the shootings, he called his girlfriend, showed her the bodies, and planned to continue his actions in a public setting, but those plans never materialized. When questioned, Nehemiah gave different accounts of his motivation. Initially, he expressed regret, but later he shared fantasies of violence and revenge. His defense team argued that he struggled with mental health issues and had experienced emotional trauma. Prosecutors, however, maintained that the crime was premeditated. In 2016, after years of legal proceedings, he was sentenced as a juvenile due to his age, meaning he would serve time until he turned 21. The case raised complex questions about juvenile justice and mental health in violent crime cases. 5. The Bever brothers. In July 2015, Robert and Michael Bever became infamous for the brutal murders of their family in Broken Arrow, Oklahoma. The tragic event unfolded on the night of July 22nd, when 18-year-old Robert and his 16-year-old brother Michael carried out a premeditated attack on their family, killing 5 of their 7 relatives. Their victims included their parents, David and April, and 3 of their younger siblings, Daniel, Christopher, and Victoria. The brothers' disturbing actions were reportedly inspired by violent media and their own fantasies of infamy. 2 siblings survived the massacre: a 2-year-old sister, who was unharmed, and a 13-year-old sister, who managed to escape with severe injuries and called 911. Her quick thinking alerted authorities to the scene, leading them to arrive in time to stop the brothers from causing further harm. When the police arrived, they discovered a horrific scene inside the house. Robert and Michael had fled to a nearby wooded area but were apprehended shortly after. During their questioning, Robert reportedly admitted to being fascinated with mass killings and shared that he and his brother had planned to continue their violence, even considering targeting others outside their family home. Robert was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole, while Michael, being a minor at the time of the crime, was sentenced to life as well, but with the possibility of parole after 28 years. The tragedy left the community in shock and raised deep questions about how such horrific plans could develop within a family that appeared, on the surface, to be normal. The surviving siblings were placed in the care of relatives, forever impacted by the violence they had witnessed. 6. Ericsmith. On August 2, 1993, Ericsmith, a 13-year-old boy from Steuben County, New York, lured 4-year-old Derek Roby into a secluded area near their neighborhood park. Smith, who was often socially awkward, bullied, and struggling with anger issues, had been having a rough time fitting in at school and dealing with personal frustrations. That summer, both boys were headed to a local summer camp, and Smith had been seen talking to Derek on the way there. Smith, who had been the target of bullying for years, took the opportunity to lure the young child into the woods, where he would commit an unspeakable act. Once in the woods, Smith strangled Derek, sexually assaulted him, and then crushed his skull with a large rock. Afterward, he left the body in the woods, where it was discovered later that day. Derek's body was found by a passerby, and his death immediately became the subject of an intense investigation. The authorities were quick to focus on Smith as a suspect due to his suspicious behavior and his proximity to the scene. Although Smith initially denied any involvement in the crime, his attitude and the fact that he was one of the last people seen near the woods where Derek's body was found raised alarms. Smith was sentenced to a minimum of 9 years to life in prison. Over the years, he repeatedly expressed remorse for his actions and applied for parole several times after becoming eligible in 2002. Each time, the family of Derek Roby, along with the prosecutors and many community members, opposed his release, citing the severity of the crime and their concerns for public safety. In October 2021, after years of legal proceedings and several denied parole requests, Smith was finally granted parole. He was released from prison in February 2022 after serving nearly 28 years. His release sparked mixed reactions, many people still struggling with the weight of his crime, while others felt he deserved a second chance. 7. Jordan Brown. In 2009, when he was just 11 years old, Jordan was charged with the murder of his father's fiancée, 26-year-old Kenzie Hook, who was 8 months pregnant with his half-brother. The crime took place in Wampum, Pennsylvania, when Hook was shot in the back of the head while she slept. The prosecution's case was largely based on circumstantial evidence. They claimed that Jordan, upset about his half-brother's upcoming birth, had killed Hook. But the defense argued that there was no clear motive or physical proof connecting him to the crime, raising doubts about the prosecution's argument. From the start, the case was controversial not only due to Jordan's young age, but also because the evidence against him was weak and inconclusive. In 2012, despite the lack of solid evidence, a judge ruled that Jordan should be tried as an adult, a decision that was met with public outrage, given his age. However, after years of legal battles, new evidence began to emerge, which eventually led to the overturning of his conviction. In 2018, the Pennsylvania Supreme Court found that there were significant issues with the original ballistics analysis, and new findings suggested that Jordan Brown might not have been the true perpetrator. Today, Jordan Brown is a free man, but his story remains a sobering reminder of the flaws in the judicial system, particularly when it comes to young individuals who may be wrongfully accused and imprisoned. 8. Joshuaphillips. Joshuaphillips' case is one of the most tragic and disturbing juvenile crime cases in modern history. At just 14 years old, Phillips was responsible for the brutal murder of his 8-year-old neighbor, Maddie Clifton, in Jacksonville, Florida, on November 3, 1998. Maddie had been playing in her backyard when she disappeared, sparking a community-wide search. Joshua, who lived a few houses down from Maddie, initially claimed that he hadn't seen her, but as the investigation progressed, his story began to unravel. After further questioning, Joshua admitted to what had happened. He had invited Maddie over to his house to play basketball. During their game, he accidentally struck her in the eye with a baseball bat. Panicking, fearing that Maddie would tell on him, Joshua attacked her again, ultimately killing her. In an effort to conceal the crime, he hid her body under his water bed and kept it there for 7 days, as the search for Maddie continued. When Maddie's body was discovered, the community was stunned, and the investigation turned its focus to Joshua, who was eventually arrested and charged with her murder. At the time of the murder, Joshua was just a teenager, and his actions were difficult for the public to comprehend, given his age. Joshuaphillips was convicted of first-degree murder and sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. Despite the tragedy of the crime, many struggled to reconcile the reality of a young boy committing such an act and questioned how the justice system should treat juveniles who commit violent crimes. Now, over 2 decades later, Phillips remains in prison serving a life sentence for the murder of Maddie Clifton. The emotional scars left on both Maddie's family and Joshua's family, as well as the community at large, remain deep and lasting. 9. Evanmiller. In 2003, at the age of 14, Miller was involved in the brutal murder of 52-year-old Cole Cannon in Alabama. Along with a friend, Miller beat Cannon with a baseball bat, then set his trailer on fire in an attempt to cover up the crime. Miller's childhood was marked by abuse, neglect, and exposure to violence, factors that his defense attorneys later argued contributed to his actions. Despite his age and background, Miller was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole, a sentence he would have to serve for a crime committed at such a young age. In 2018, the case was reopened, and he was granted a new sentencing hearing, where his attorneys argued that his troubled upbringing, his age at the time of the crime, and his potential for rehabilitation should be considered in determining a fair sentence. The court ultimately reduced his sentence, giving Miller the possibility of parole, an opportunity that was not available to him under the previous ruling. 10. Scottkologi. The case of Scottkologi, a young man from New Jersey, is a tragic and haunting example of how mental health struggles, when left unaddressed, can sometimes spiral into devastating outcomes. In 2017, at the age of 16, Scott shot and killed his parents, sister, and a family friend in a violent outburst at their home in Long Branch, New Jersey. The killings took place on January 13, 2018, when Scott used a rifle to shoot and kill his mother, 44-year-old Linda Kologi, his father, 42-year-old Stephen Kologi, his 18-year-old sister, Brittany Kologi, and 70-year-old family friend Mary Scholes, who had been visiting at the time. After the murders, Scott calmly called 911, reporting the killings to the dispatcher and stating that he was waiting for the police. When authorities arrived at the house, they found the bodies of the victims and Scott still inside. The investigation into the killings revealed that Scott had a history of mental health issues, including depression and emotional distress. However, there was no clear motive for the violence, and investigators did not find any signs that might have warned them of what was to come. Scott's behavior during the 911 call, detached, calm, and almost emotionless, led some to question whether he fully understood the gravity of his actions at the time. In 2019, Scott was charged with 4 counts of murder and 1 count of unlawful possession of a weapon. His defense team argued that he had been suffering from significant mental illness at the time of the killings, and as a result, he was found unfit to stand trial in the traditional sense. Instead of facing trial as an adult, Scott was ordered to undergo psychiatric evaluations and treatment, with the court recognizing his mental health struggles as a key factor in the crime. The tragedy of the Kologi family's deaths left their community and loved ones devastated. The failure to recognize and intervene in mental health crises can have devastating consequences, not only for the individual suffering, but for those around them. 11. Seunghuicho. When Seunghuicho was about 8 years old, his family emigrated from South Korea to the United States and ran a dry cleaning business in Virginia. Cho was teased by other students from an early age and was later described by his college professors as a problematic loner. In 2005, he was twice accused of stalking female students, but none of the victims pressed charges. After Cho made suicidal remarks to his roommate, he was admitted to a psychiatric hospital in December 2005, but was released with instructions to undergo outpatient treatment. On April 16, 2007, Cho began his killing spree, killing 2 female students in a dormitory just after 7 a.m. He then entered a classroom building and began firing at students and faculty. At approximately 9:45 a.m., he killed 32 people and wounded several others. The rampage only ended when Cho turned the gun on himself and shot himself in the head. It's hard to imagine what could drive a child to commit such an act. Are they born with something wrong? Or are deeper issues like a broken home, untreated mental illness, or a toxic environment to blame? It's easy to judge, but we have to remember there's often more beneath the surface. So what do you think? Is there always hope for redemption, or are there cases where it's too late? I'd love to hear your thoughts. If this video made you think, like, share, and subscribe for more discussions like this. Thanks for watching, and take care.